The orange sunset painted the sky as Sarah Chen pulled her black Honda Civic into Miller's gas station, located on a quiet stretch of Highway 20 outside Atlanta. The small station's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, creating pools of light in the growing darkness. Her friend and fellow detective, Maria Rodriguez, sat in the passenger seat, finishing the last of her coffee from their earlier stop. "We should fill up here," Sarah said, glancing at the fuel gauge that hovered just above empty. "It's another hour to the city, and I don't want to risk running low." Maria nodded in agreement, stretching her arms after their long drive from the police training seminar in Tennessee. The two women had spent the last 3 days learning advanced defensive tactics, and while they were tired, both felt more confident in their abilities. Sarah, at 32, had been a detective for 5 years, specializing in domestic violence cases. Maria, 2 years younger, worked in the narcotics division. Both wore civilian clothes, Sarah in dark jeans and a blue sweater, Maria in black pants and a gray t-shirt. Their badges and service weapons remained concealed, but within easy reach, a habit born from years on the force. As Sarah began pumping gas, Maria stepped out to throw away their coffee cups and grab some snacks from the small convenience store. The evening was quiet except for the gentle hum of the gas pump and the occasional passing car. Through the store's windows, Maria could see a young woman, probably in her early 20s, working behind the counter. Her name tag read Jenny. The peaceful moment was interrupted by the distant rumble of motorcycles. Sarah looked up from the pump, her trained eyes catching the glint of chrome and steel as 3 large bikes turned into the station. Something about them made her instincts kick in. Maybe it was the way they moved too fast through the lot, or how their license plates seemed oddly positioned, making them hard to read. The bikers parked their motorcycles near the store entrance, the engine's roar cutting through the evening silence before dying out. Sarah observed them carefully while pretending to focus on the gas pump. All 3 men were large, dressed in worn leather vests covered in patches. The leader, distinguishable by his gray beard and massive arms covered in faded tattoos, stood at least 6 feet tall. His companions weren't much smaller. One wore a red bandana and had a noticeable scar across his left cheek, while the other had long black hair tied back in a ponytail. Inside the store, Maria felt the atmosphere change as soon as the bikers entered. The young cashier's smile disappeared, replaced by a nervous expression as she pulled her arms close to her body. Maria recognized the body language of someone who felt threatened, and she casually positioned herself near the chip display where she could watch both the cashier and the bikers. Sarah finished pumping gas and replaced the nozzle, but she didn't return to her car. Her instincts, honed by years of police work, told her something wasn't right. She pulled out her phone and, without drawing attention to herself, sent a quick text to dispatch with their location and a brief situation report. Standard procedure when something felt off. The bell above the store door chimed as 2 of the bikers, bandana and ponytail, went inside. Their heavy boots echoed on the linoleum floor as they moved through the aisles, speaking loudly and laughing in a way that made Jenny the cashier visibly uncomfortable. Maria caught Sarah's eye through the window, a silent communication passing between them born from years of partnership. The leader remained outside, lighting a cigarette despite the no smoking sign near the gas pumps. He noticed Sarah standing by her car and took a long drag, his eyes moving over her in a way that made her skin crawl. But Sarah didn't flinch or look away. She dealt with far worse in her career, and while she was in civilian clothes, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of a trained officer. As the sky grew darker and the station's fluorescent lights became brighter, tension began building in the air like the static before a storm. Sarah could hear the bikers' voices getting louder inside the store, their laughter taking on a more menacing tone. She watched as Maria casually moved closer to the counter, positioning herself where she could better protect Jenny if needed. Neither Sarah nor Maria had wanted trouble on their drive home, but years of experience told them that trouble had just pulled up on 3 motorcycles. They weren't looking for a fight, they were prepared for whatever might happen next. The training they just completed ran through their minds as they silently assessed the situation, waiting to see what the next few minutes would bring. Inside the store, the situation grew more tense with each passing minute. The biker with the red bandana walked up to the counter where Jenny stood, placing his large hands on the surface and leaning forward. His friend with the ponytail blocked the end of the snack aisle, cutting off the most direct path to the exit. "Hey there," "Sweetheart," Bandana said, his voice rough. "Why don't you give me your number? We could have some fun later." Jenny's hands trembled as she pretended to organize items behind the counter, trying to avoid eye contact. Maria watched the scene unfold while pretending to read a magazine. Her right hand stayed close to her concealed weapon, hidden beneath her untucked t-shirt. Years of working narcotics had taught her how to spot trouble before it started, and these men were sending all the wrong signals. Outside, the leader took another drag of his cigarette, moving closer to Sarah's car. She could smell the mix of leather, cigarette smoke, and something stronger on his breath. Probably whiskey. Her training kicked in as she noticed his unsteady walk and slightly slurred speech. Drunk bikers were always more dangerous than sober ones. "Nice car you got here," the leader said, running his hand along the hood of Sarah's Honda. "But a pretty lady like you should be riding with me instead." He grinned, revealing yellowed teeth. Sarah remained calm, keeping her face neutral while scanning for weapons. She noticed a knife handle sticking out of his boot and something suspicious bulging under his vest. Inside, Ponytail had moved closer to Maria, pretending to look at energy drinks while blocking more of her movement space. "You look like you could use some company," he said, his voice carrying a threat beneath the fake friendliness. "Why don't you come sit on my bike? I'll show you what real power feels like." Maria smiled politely but said nothing, maintaining her position where she could see both Jenny and the store's entrance. Through the window, she watched Sarah dealing with the leader, noting how her partner had shifted into a defensive stance that wouldn't be obvious to untrained eyes. Jenny's voice shook as she spoke to Bandana. "Sir, I need to ask you to step back from the counter." Her words seemed to amuse him, and he leaned in even closer. "Or what, darling? You gonna make me?" Bandana laughed, looking back at his friend. "Hey, Mike, this little lady thinks she can tell me what to do." The tension in the store rose as other customers, an elderly man and a teenage boy, quietly made their way to the exit, sensing trouble. The bell chimed as they left, leaving only the bikers, Jenny, and Maria inside. Outside, the leader had moved to block Sarah's car door. "Come on, don't be like that," he said, his voice getting harder as Sarah continued to ignore his advances. "We're just trying to be friendly." His hand moved toward his vest, and Sarah noticed his fingers brush against the hidden bulge. Maria watched through the window as she sent a silent text to dispatch. "Possible 10 to 45, Miller's gas station. 3 suspects, weapons likely, request backup." She kept her movements subtle, making it look like she was just checking her phone. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Jenny's face grew paler. Bandana had started reaching across the counter, his intentions clear in his bloodshot eyes. The security camera in the corner blinked its red light steadily, recording everything. "Last chance to be nice," the leader told Sarah, his friendly act dropping away to reveal something darker. "You don't want to make us angry." His boots scraped against the pavement as he moved even closer, using his size to try to intimidate her. Sarah and Maria caught each other's eyes through the store window again. In that brief glance, they communicated everything they needed to know. Both women recognized that the situation was about to reach a breaking point. The recent training ran through their minds as they prepared for what would happen next. The only question was which biker would make the first wrong move, and how badly they would regret it. The situation exploded into action when Bandana reached across the counter and grabbed Jenny's wrist. The young cashier let out a frightened cry, trying to pull away from his grip. That was all Maria needed to see. Years of police training kicked in as she stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tense air. "Take your hand off her. Now." Maria's command was calm but firm. Both bikers turned to look at her, surprised by her sudden intervention. Bandana's grip on Jenny's wrist loosened slightly, but he didn't let go. "Mind your own business, lady," Ponytail growled, moving to block Maria's path to the counter. "This is between us and the cashier." Outside, the leader heard the commotion and stepped away from Sarah, looking toward the store window. It was the opening Sarah needed. She quickly moved away from her car, positioning herself where she could see both the store entrance and the leader. Inside, Maria took another step forward. "I won't say it again," she warned, her hand now resting openly near her concealed weapon. "Let her go." Bandana finally released Jenny's wrist, but his face twisted with anger. "Who do you think you are?" he snarled, turning his full attention to Maria. Jenny took advantage of his distraction and ran through a door marked Employees Only, locking it behind her. The leader burst through the store's entrance, the bell ringing violently above the door. Sarah followed him inside, staying close to the wall. The small store now felt even smaller with all three bikers and both women inside. "These ladies are causing trouble?" the leader asked his friends, his words slightly slurred. His hand stayed near his vest, where the suspicious bulge was clearly visible now. "The one in the gray shirt thinks she's some kind of hero," Ponytail sneered, moving closer to Maria. All three bikers were now focused on her, forming a loose semicircle. Maria stood her ground, her training keeping her calm even as her heart raced. She could see Sarah positioning herself near the door, already knowing what was about to happen. "Last chance," the leader announced, his voice dropping dangerously low. "You ladies walk out of here now, and we forget this happened. Otherwise," he let the threat hang in the air. That's when they heard it. Police sirens in the distance. Jenny must have called 911 from the back room. The leader's face darkened with anger. "You called the cops," he growled, taking an aggressive step toward Maria. His hand moved to his vest again, but before he could reach whatever was hidden there, Maria and Sarah made their move. "Police! Don't move!" Both women announced their presence simultaneously, badges appearing in their left hands while their right hands moved to their weapons. The bikers froze, their faces showing shock and confusion. "On your knees, hands where we can see them," Sarah commanded, her voice carrying the authority of her years on the force. The leader's face turned red with rage as he realized they'd been dealing with police officers the whole time. Ponytail made a desperate move, trying to rush toward the door, but Sarah was ready. She stepped into his path, her stance solid from years of training. "Bad decision," she said calmly. "On your knees now." The sirens grew louder as local patrol cars pulled into the gas station parking lot, their blue and red lights flashing through the store windows. The bikers, realizing they were trapped, finally began to lower themselves to their knees, their hands raising slowly into the air. Through the locked door, Jenny watched on the security monitor as her harassers were surrounded by police officers. Outside, more patrol cars arrived, their lights illuminating the scene like a carnival gone wrong. The night had turned out very differently than the bikers had planned, all because they'd chosen to mess with the wrong women at a gas station. 4 patrol cars surrounded the gas station, their lights painting the scene in flashing red and blue. Inside the store, the 3 bikers remained on their knees, hands raised, but the leader's eyes burned with defiance as uniformed officers entered through the front door. "These badges are probably fake," the leader spat out, trying to save face even as he knelt on the cold linoleum floor. "They can't be real cops." Officer James Wilson, first to arrive on scene, immediately recognized Sarah and Maria. They had worked several cases together in the past. "Detectives Chen and Rodriguez." He greeted them professionally, hiding a small smile. "I see you've had an interesting evening." The leader's face fell as he realized his mistake. Ponytail started sweating visibly, while Bandana stared at the floor, all his previous bravado gone. The local officers began securing the scene, patting down each biker with practiced efficiency. "Got a concealed weapon here," announced Officer Thompson as she checked the leader. She carefully removed a handgun from his vest, the source of the suspicious bulge Sarah had noticed earlier. No permit, and the serial number's been filed off. Jenny emerged from the back room once the uniformed officers gave her the all-clear. Her hands were still shaking, but her voice was steady as she described what had happened. "Those 2 officers saved me," she said, pointing to Sarah and Maria. "They stayed calm and protected me when those men were getting aggressive." As the officers conducted their search, more evidence piled up. They found illegal drugs in Ponytail's jacket pockets, an unregistered knife in Bandana's boot, and outstanding warrants for all 3 men. What had started as harassment at a gas station was turning into a much bigger case. Sarah stood near the counter, writing her official report while Maria helped the other officers gather evidence. The security camera footage would be valuable. It captured everything from the initial harassment to the final arrest. "You got lucky," the leader growled at Sarah as Officer Wilson prepared to escort him to a patrol car. "If we'd known you were cops." "You'd have what?" Maria cut him off, her voice stern. "Made better choices? Because that gun you were carrying illegally tells me you weren't planning anything good tonight." Outside, a small crowd had gathered to watch the scene unfold. The elderly man and teenage boy who had left earlier stood near their cars, giving statements to another officer about what they had witnessed before the situation escalated. Jenny's manager arrived, having been called about the incident. After reviewing the security footage, he turned to Sarah and Maria with gratitude. "Thank God you two stopped here tonight," he said, shaking his head. "Jenny's been dealing with harassment from customers, but nothing like this before." As the bikers were loaded into separate patrol cars, Sarah noticed their motorcycles had out-of-state plates. A quick check revealed that 2 of the bikes were stolen, adding more charges to their growing list of crimes. "Just wanted to get gas and snacks," Maria said to Sarah, finally allowing herself to relax a little. "Didn't expect to make 3 arrests on our way home from training." Sarah nodded, finishing her report. "Good thing we just had that defensive tactics refresher." She looked at the security camera footage playing on the store's monitor, showing how they had handled the situation. The academy will probably use this video for training. The gas station slowly returned to normal as the patrol cars departed one by one, each carrying a subdued biker who had learned a hard lesson about judging people by appearances. Jenny returned to her place behind the counter, standing taller now, knowing she was safe. Officer Wilson approached the 2 detectives one last time. "The captain's going to want to hear about this tomorrow," he said with respect in his voice. "You 2 handled this perfectly, minimal force. By the book. No one hurt." Back at the police station, the booking process was in full swing. The 3 bikers sat in separate holding cells, their tough guy attitudes completely deflated. Detective Sarah Chen watched through the observation window as Officer Thompson interviewed the leader, whose real name turned out to be Frank Tank Morrison, a man with a long criminal record. "So let me get this straight," Thompson said, reviewing her notes. "You 3 rode into Atlanta on stolen motorcycles, carrying illegal weapons, just to have some fun at local gas stations." Her tone made it clear how foolish their plan sounded. In the cell next door, Bandana, whose real name was Steve Peters, couldn't stop talking. Fear had loosened his tongue, and he was spilling information about other crimes the group had committed across 3 states. Maria stood at the evidence booking desk, carefully logging everything they'd found. 3 illegal firearms, various drugs, stolen credit cards, and fake IDs. Each item added more charges to their case. "You won't believe this," Officer Wilson called out, walking quickly toward Sarah with a paper in his hand. "We just got the full background check on these guys. They're wanted in Tennessee for a string of gas station robberies. Same pattern, they'd harass female employees, then rob the place once they thought everyone was intimidated." Sarah's eyes widened slightly. So that's what they were planning tonight. She thought about Jenny, the young cashier, and felt even more relieved that they'd stopped at that particular gas station at that exact time. The police station buzzed with activity as more information about the bikers came to light. Ponytail, whose real name was Michael Mike Davidson, had started crying in his cell, begging to make a deal in exchange for information about their other crimes. Captain Roberts called Sarah and Maria into his office. The gruff but fair captain had been reviewing the gas station's security footage on his computer screen. "Outstanding work, detectives," he said, pausing the video. "This could have gone very badly if you 2 hadn't been there." "Just lucky timing, sir," Maria replied modestly. "We almost stopped at a different station." "Lucky for everyone except those 3, the captain said, shaking his head. "By the way, the FBI just called. They've been tracking these guys for months. Apparently, they're part of a larger criminal organization." Outside the captain's office, more officers were gathering evidence and taking statements. Jenny had arrived to formally file her complaint, looking much more confident than she had earlier that evening. She smiled when she saw Sarah and Maria. "I can't thank you enough," Jenny said. "I was so scared, but the way you both handled everything. It was amazing. Like watching professionals in action." "That's exactly what you were watching," Officer Thompson said as she walked by with more evidence bags. "These 2 are some of our best detectives." The night shift was in full swing now, and news of the gas station incident had spread through the department. Other officers stopped by to congratulate Sarah and Maria on their quick thinking and professional handling of the situation. "The training department wants the security footage," Captain Roberts announced, coming out of his office. They're saying it's a perfect example of how to handle an escalating situation with minimal force. Sarah and Maria exchanged tired but satisfied looks. What had started as a simple gas stop on their way home from a training seminar had turned into a major bust. Not only had they protected Jenny and themselves, but they'd also helped catch 3 dangerous criminals who had been terrorizing people across multiple states. "You know what this means, right?" Maria said to Sarah as they finally gathered their things to head home. "There's going to be a ton of paperwork tomorrow." Sarah laughed, the tension of the evening finally breaking. "True, but it's worth it. Those guys won't be harassing anyone else for a long time." The night shift continued around them as officers processed the 3 bikers, who now faced serious federal charges. In their holding cells, the once intimidating men sat quietly, all their bravado gone, realizing too late that they had indeed messed with the wrong women at that gas station. The next morning, the story of the gas station incident spread quickly through the Atlanta Police Department. Sarah and Maria arrived at their desks to find their email inboxes full of messages from other departments and even the FBI. Special Agent Turner from the FBI's Violent Crimes Division walked into the precinct around 9 a.m. He was a tall man in a crisp suit who carried a thick file folder under his arm. "Detectives Chen and Rodriguez?" he called out, scanning the room. "We need to talk about the 3 bikers you arrested last night." In the conference room, Agent Turner spread out photos and documents across the table. "These men belong to a larger criminal organization called the Iron Wolves," he explained, pointing to surveillance photos. "We've been tracking them for months. They've hit gas stations and small stores in 5 states. Sarah leaned forward, examining a map marked with red dots showing the group's previous crimes. "They always targeted places with female employees working alone," Agent Turner continued. "But they made a huge mistake when they picked your gas station." Maria reviewed the case files, her eyes widening at the details. "According to this, they've stolen over $200,000 in their raids, plus all the stolen vehicles and weapons charges." Captain Roberts joined them, bringing coffee for everyone. "The FBI wants to coordinate with us on this case," he announced. "Your arrest last night might help bring down their entire organization." Meanwhile, down in the holding cells, the 3 bikers were having a rough morning. Frank "Tank" Morrison sat with his head in his hands, realizing how badly he'd messed up. His lawyer had just told him the long list of charges he was facing. Federal charges, multiple state charges, weapons violations, the lawyer read from his notepad. "They got you on video, clear evidence of intent, and your friends are already talking to the prosecutors." In another interview room, Mike Ponytail Davidson was doing exactly that. "I'll tell you everything," he said nervously to the federal prosecutor. "About the Iron Wolves, their leaders, every job we ever pulled. Just please consider a lighter sentence." Steve "Bandana" Peters wasn't doing any better. The tough guy who had terrorized Jenny at the counter now sat crying in his cell, begging to call his mother. Back upstairs, Jenny arrived at the station to finalize her statement. She looked different today, confident, no longer afraid. Several officers had already submitted commendations for her bravery in handling the situation. "The security video is amazing," Jenny told Sarah and Maria. "My friends can't believe how calm you both stayed. You made those guys look like complete amateurs." She smiled, then added, "My boss is installing better security cameras and hiring a security guard for night shifts now." Around lunchtime, reporters gathered outside the police station. The story had made the morning news. 3 wanted criminals caught by 2 off-duty detectives at a gas station. Captain Roberts handled the press conference, praising Sarah and Maria's professionalism while protecting Jenny's privacy. "This case shows that crime doesn't pay," the captain told the cameras. "And it definitely shows that you shouldn't judge people by their appearance. Those criminals thought they found easy targets. Instead, they found 2 of Atlanta's finest detectives." Inside, Sarah and Maria watched the press conference on TV, slightly embarrassed by all the attention. "We just stopped for gas," Sarah said, shaking her head. "We did what any officer would do." "Maybe," Agent Turner replied, "but you did it perfectly. The FBI's training division is already asking for copies of that security footage. We'll use it to show how to handle armed suspects without things turning violent." By afternoon, the Iron Wolves leadership was getting nervous. Police in 3 states had launched raids based on information from the arrested bikers. Their whole operation was falling apart because 3 of their members had harassed the wrong women at a gas station. I guess they learned an expensive lesson, Maria said as she finished another report. Don't judge a book by its cover. And don't harass people at gas stations, Sarah added with a small smile. You never know who might be carrying a badge. 1 week after the gas station incident, the impact of that night continued to grow. Sarah and Maria sat in a federal courthouse, watching as Frank Tank Morrison and his 2 companions appeared before the judge for their preliminary hearing. Gone were their leather vests and tough guy attitudes. Instead, they wore orange jumpsuits and handcuffs, looking small and defeated in the large courtroom. The federal prosecutor stood before the judge, reading a long list of charges. Your Honor, the defendants are charged with multiple federal crimes across 5 states, the prosecutor announced, including armed robbery, weapons trafficking, drug possession, harassment, and participating in organized crime as members of the Iron Wolves gang. In the gallery, Jenny sat with her family, watching the proceedings. She had become something of a local hero after the incident, speaking to other gas station workers about safety and awareness. Several female employees from other targeted stations had come forward after seeing the news, strengthening the case against the Iron Wolves. Based on information provided by the defendants, the prosecutor continued, law enforcement has arrested 12 more members of the Iron Wolves organization. We've recovered stolen property worth over $500,000. The judge, a stern-faced woman with gray hair, looked down at the 3 bikers. You gentlemen chose to terrorize innocent people, thinking you were untouchable, she said firmly. Instead, you happened to harass 2 highly trained police detectives. Sometimes justice has a sense of irony. Outside the courtroom, Agent Turner shared updates with Sarah and Maria about the broader investigation. The Iron Wolves are falling apart, he explained, showing them photos of recent arrests. Everyone's turning on each other, trying to make deals. All because you 2 stopped for gas that night. Back at the Atlanta Police Department, Captain Roberts had more good news. The City Council is launching a new safety program for late-night workers, he told them. They're using your gas station incident as a wake-up call. Every store will get panic buttons and better security systems. The police academy had already incorporated the gas station security footage into their training program. New recruits watched how Sarah and Maria handled the situation, learning from their calm professionalism and perfect timing. See how they maintained control without escalating the situation, the academy instructor explained to his class. They gave the suspects every chance to back down, kept the civilians safe, and coordinated perfectly with responding officers. Later that afternoon, Sarah and Maria visited Miller's gas station. The place looked different now. New security cameras, better lighting, and a sign advertising 24-hour security monitoring. Jenny greeted them with a bright smile from behind the counter. You won't believe how much has changed, Jenny told them excitedly. 3 other stations in the area hired security guards. My boss gave me a raise, and I'm taking self-defense classes now. She pointed to a small frame on the wall, containing a newspaper article about the incident. Maria noticed how Jenny stood taller now, more confident. You were brave that night, she told the young cashier. You kept your head and did everything right. As they left the gas station, several customers recognized them from the news coverage. A young woman approached them shyly. Thank you for what you did, she said. I work nights at a convenience store, and your story inspired us to demand better security. You showed us that we don't have to accept being harassed. Sarah checked her phone, seeing a message from Agent Turner. 2 more Iron Wolves leaders had just been arrested in Tennessee. Their entire operation was crumbling, all because 3 of their members had made the mistake of targeting the wrong gas station. It's amazing how one small decision can have such big consequences, Sarah said as they drove back to the station. If we'd stopped for gas anywhere else that night, those guys would still be out there terrorizing people, Maria finished. Instead, they're facing federal charges, their gang is destroyed, and stores are getting better security. The sun was setting over Atlanta as they drove, painting the sky in orange and purple, just like it had been on that fateful night when 3 bikers learned the hard way not to judge people by appearances. 3 months after the gas station incident, Sarah and Maria stood in front of a large crowd at the Atlanta Police Department's annual awards ceremony. The police chief approached the podium, holding 2 shiny commendation medals. Tonight, We honor Detectives Sarah Chen and Maria Rodriguez, the chief announced, his voice filling the packed auditorium. Their actions not only protected a civilian but led to the dismantling of one of the most dangerous criminal organizations operating across the Southeast. In the audience, Jenny sat with her family, beaming with pride. She wore a new name badge identifying her as the night shift supervisor at Miller's gas station. Next to her sat Agent Turner from the FBI, who had driven down from Washington specially for this ceremony. The Iron Wolves gang is now completely disbanded, the chief continued. Thanks to information gathered from those initial arrests, law enforcement has captured 37 gang members across 6 states. We've recovered stolen property worth over $2 million. As Sarah and Maria received their medals, the screen behind them showed clips from that night's security footage, now famous throughout law enforcement training programs. The audience watched as the two detectives handled the situation with perfect professionalism. Frank "Tank" Morrison and his 2 companions had received their sentences the week before. The judge had shown no mercy. 20 years for Morrison, 15 each for bandana and ponytail. Their testimony against other gang members had prevented life sentences, but they wouldn't be harassing anyone for a very long time. After the ceremony, Jenny approached the detectives with exciting news. "I'm starting the police academy next month," she announced proudly. "What happened that night showed me that I want to help protect people, just like you both did." Agent Turner shared updates about the broader impact of the case. "Gas station robberies have dropped 60% across the region," he explained. "Every state is implementing new safety protocols for late-night workers. You've started a real movement for change." The local news had dubbed it the gas station effect. How one failed harassment attempt had sparked widespread improvements in worker safety. Businesses had installed better security systems, panic buttons were now standard equipment, and employee training had been completely revamped. "Remember how scared I was that night?" Jenny asked, looking at her new supervisor badge. "Now I train other employees on how to handle difficult situations. We even use the security video in our safety classes." Sarah and Maria's story had spread beyond law enforcement. Women's self-defense classes across the city used their example to teach awareness and confidence. The incident had shown that appearances could be deceiving, and that staying calm under pressure was more powerful than physical intimidation. Captain Roberts approached them with one final piece of news. "The FBI Training Academy wants you both to come speak to their new agents," he said. "They're calling your gas station incident a perfect example of quiet strength in law enforcement." Later that evening, Sarah and Maria drove past Miller's gas station. The place looked completely different now: bright lights, security cameras, and a new sign advertising 24-hour police patrol support. Several other stations in the area had copied these improvements. "Hard to believe it all started because we needed gas," Maria said, looking at her commendation medal. "And because 3 bikers made some very poor assumptions," Sarah added with a slight smile. They thought about those 3 men, now sitting in federal prison, would learn the hard way that you can't judge people by their appearance. Their attempt to harass 2 women at a gas station had cost them their freedom, destroyed their criminal organization, and sparked positive changes that would protect countless others. As they drove away, a young female employee waved from behind the counter, looking confident and secure in her well-lit store. The gas station that had once been the scene of attempted harassment had become a symbol of positive change. The story of how 3 bikers messed with the wrong women would be told for years to come, in police academies, security training sessions, and anywhere else where people needed to learn that true strength often comes in unexpected packages.